feelings aren't important, and that this isn't a space for us. So this is going to be an exercise in this sometimes feeling like it might not be a space for you, and I think that's a really important thing for you to acquaint yourself with. And so that's the thing that I'm going to say right now. That's the only thing I'm saying that's going to be directed at, specifically at cis men, because the other thing that I tend to do in these situations is I try to break away from something that I see as a very invisible and pervasive thing within the feminist movement, which is we feel like we have to sell it to men, and I don't do that. I don't say, well, patriarchy hurts men too, because I don't believe that I have to validate my own anti-oppression movement by making it matter to an oppressive group. So I'm not going to coddle you through it, and I'm not going to tell you that this is your fight too, because sometimes it's not, and sometimes you're not going to understand what I'm talking about, and you're just going to have to deal with that. In the same way that I have to deal with that with other privileges that I have. I have to sit down and shut up sometimes and understand that I don't know the experiences of other people. And I have to listen to those people, and listening is a really important thing to do. So, one of the things that I also talk a lot about is sort of the makeup of our movement. To people outside the movement, I came in, a little bit about me, I'll talk about me first. I came into animal rights activism, I came into anarchism, I came into every other ism that I have through feminism, which makes me sort of weird in this community, because people will talk to me about like all the things that turned them vegan or made them vegan, and I can't relate to it because that wasn't what made me a vegan. What made me a vegan was understanding that animal agriculture is a direct exploitation of female animals' bodies. It's breeding programs that make meat, eggs, and dairy of both feminized proteins. They're exploiting the reproductive systems of female animals exclusively. A lot of times we talk about like, oh, when male chicks get ground up in the system. I hear that so much more than I hear about the fact that this is the exploitation of female reproductive systems across species, and that's what it is. And I don't know why we don't call that out, because this is a feminist issue. And I feel like as soon as I made that connection, there was no way I could unconnect it. I could never walk into the grocery store and see eggs or see milk and not see women. And that was just how it was for me. I came into anarchism because I realized that nobody was fighting for me who's in power right now. The things that I care about, the people who are in power right now, they're not fighting for them. So why would I support that system? Why would I say that that's a good thing to support? Why would I go out and say, okay, yeah, I'll take the lesser evil here, because you might be fighting for me a little bit. A little bit isn't good enough for me. And so that's why I came into anarchism. I didn't come into it through, punk culture. I didn't come into it through, a MFA table somewhere, HSUS. I came into it because I personally started to identify with other women who were not my species. And so that's how I walked into this thing. Now, because I came into it in an atypical way, I sort of interacted with it in an atypical sort of way. One of the things, because I came from feminist organizing when I moved into animal rights organizing, and my feminist friends who are outside of animal rights cannot believe how many predatory men are in the animal rights community. They say like, but I figured these would be like really compassionate men. These are men who have decided not to eat cheese anymore. So, wow. But these are also men who think they don't have anything else to learn, and that makes them very dangerous men. They think that they've done enough, and any man who thinks he's done enough suddenly becomes very dangerous to me. I become very suspicious of that man. When men tell me how much they check their privilege, I am just like, wow, okay, cool. Why are you telling me? Why aren't you asking me questions? There's all kinds of tells. When a dude wants to talk to me about feminism for an hour and a half, but doesn't ask me a single question, that's a red flag for me. Because I'm like, oh, so you think it's cool, but you don't respect me enough to learn something from me. You don't think you have anything to learn from me. Thank you for telling me that you've already got it. So much, now I feel so much safer because you have nothing left to learn. Great. So, one of the things that my friends are always bringing up is, why are there so many predators in this community? I did my graduate degree work on veganism as a social movement, and one of the things that I studied was, how is it that people become vegan? And I talked to a lot of different people, male-identified people, female-identified people, and a lot of the men that I talked to came into it through pretty bro-y stuff. Punk music, the hardcore zine, like they came into it like they basically moshed into animal rights. Okay, so you've got a lot of work to do if that's how you got here. Or they came in because tits told them to. Oh, I saw a PETA demo, and I'm like, okay, that appealed to you? Like, when I looked at the materials that we're using to recruit men, I was like, that material isn't recruiting me. This isn't speaking to me. This isn't talking to me. Who's this talking to? When I see women standing downtown, and all the power to the women, all the power to the women. If you want to take your clothes off and stand downtown and talk about animals, awesome. You do that. If you chose that, A-okay with me. I love it. Go out there. I love when women make men uncomfortable with their nudity. Oh, it makes me so happy. We do clinic support at like a clinic that is like a women's clinic, and 40 Days for Life rolls through, and all the elderly Christian men show up to tell us all what we should and shouldn't do with our bodies. And one of the things that my friends and I did was we all basically just like, we went out there and we basically dressed like as provocatively as we could, but we chose it, and then we stood with all of them. And it made them so uncomfortable because we were commanding our bodies right there, and it was like they really wanted us to cover up, and we're like, no, this is how I feel like dressing today, and I'm allowed. And if I want to go into that clinic, I'm allowed to do that too. And if you have a problem with it, like, come stop me. I dare you. And I love that. I love that. I love that. I love that. And there's a lot of stuff where like women will take off their clothes, and it becomes a really empowering thing for them personally, and I'm all about that. What I don't like is when somebody else tells them that's what they should do, or that's how they contribute to their movement. A really big problem with that. So when I started looking around, I started seeing, for example, lettuce ladies turning up everywhere. And now I got some problems with PETA, but I also try to not group everything into like one big ball. So there's some stuff that PETA's done and I'm like, okay, that's cool. Why don't we do that all the time because that's actually helpful? Stop doing all this other ridiculous bullshit where we're basically just trading in oppression. So we're trading the oppression of women for the emancipation of animals, and I really don't think I don't like that trade. I don't think we should trade in aggressions. So with those materials though, when I see all these like hypersexualized images, I start to see how it is that we got so many predators in our movement when this is who we're recruiting. We're recruiting the person who's going to stop on the street when they see a naked woman on a poster with something scrawled on her belly. That guy picks up the literature and reads it. We aren't actively recruiting the people we want to see sitting next to us in our movement. We're recruiting the easiest people in the world to recruit, which is like totally basic dudes walking around the mall who haven't thought about anything yet. And then we look up in our meetings and our movements and things like that, and we go, why is this so hard? And we're like, oh, it's because we invited all of these douchebags to the table before we invited anybody else. So why are we doing that? And I say to people, if you've got a really cool friend and they're like with it and they understand, some other struggle or some other thing that's going on, like we go into the anti-nude movement, we go into feminist organizing circles, and we talk to those people because those are the people that I want in my group. So it's harder, it's way harder because you actually have to like talk to them. You can't just like, and get them to follow you, you have to actually like engage them. And so I say to people all the time, like ask yourself, who are your materials targeting, and do you want that person in your group? Because it might be easy to bring them in, but we maybe don't want them here. Until they start working on their other shit, then they can come in. Or if they want to come in and work on their shit, great.